as long as they don't have those two reasons that we are required to deny them, um, they can be approved for an EHV. Um, but because it's low barrier, when it comes to eligibility, it's often makes them a higher barrier to housing. So a client can become eligible and they can search for housing and they can have a really hard time finding a landlord who will rent to them because of their criminal background or because of an eviction or poor rental history or poor credit. So um, we've had to do a lot of extra work on the front end in helping get them um, housed because it is such a low barrier program. Um, Excuse me, go ahead in the next slide. So the benefits of EHV, which are new and different to this program, and other special programs don't have these benefits. And again, these are the things that are unique to IHCDA. Other PHAs will have similar benefits, but you'll need to refer the clients for the specifics. But with IHCDA, we provide the owner an incentive payment of $1,000 for the first EHV participant. They get 500 once we get all of the lease up paperwork back, and then once they get the other half, that final payment of that first year. So some agencies across the country do a lease renewal bonus, and we just decided to take that and divide it from the beginning to the end. Most of our clients have completed their annual recertifications and they have continued to be housed. We've had a few that had some problems, but the landlord was willing to let them finish out their lease and then let them move. So that's been helpful um, because they want to get that incentive. So at the very least, the client has a year of good rental history when they're looking for their next unit. Um, for any additional EHV clients beyond that first one, they get $500 incentive. So they'll get $250 at the beginning and $250 at the end. And we have several landlords that have that. They'll have 8 to 10 of our clients, and that works really well. Sometimes we'll have a landlord lease up, and they'll just have 1 or 2. But it's been good. Some of them that we're working with also have um, never housed anybody through Section 8 before, so we're actually gaining new landlords for the PHA. The client allowable expenses, application fees and security deposits, those are paid directly to the landlord when they lease up, or they're paid to the clients to reimburse them. Utility deposits and arrears, we can pay directly to the utility company, or we can reimburse the client or a third party for what they paid with the receipts and everything. One of the special things about this is there are some agencies in the communities that are able to help with utility deposits, but they're not able to help with arrears. And when we've been able to pay off quite a bit of utility debt for clients so that they could get services in their own name. Moving expenses, they just updated that information, but so far, moving expensive have covered moving trucks and things like that. The essential household items, we haven't had tons of claims for those, but they generally have been um, kitchen and bathroom items, bedding and things like that. We don't cover furniture or appliances, but we can assist with the bare necessities to get them comfortable in their new unit when they're coming off the streets. Next slide, please. Okay. So how are the funds distributed? So the housing specialist, whether it is with our LSA partner or with a PHA that didn't get their own EHV vouchers that are billing us, they'll have a housing specialist and they work with the client to complete the claim forms and to get the documents together, and they submit those to us. Like I said before, we can directly pay the utility company or the landlord, um, or the client, or a third party agency that made the client on or made the payment on the client's behalf. We just need to get information from any of those other agencies, like their W-9, so that we can make those payments. Um, I think that's it on that one. Next slide, please. So this slide was added, and it didn't occur to me that it was something that you guys wouldn't know, because sometimes I forget that we all have different perspectives. So with it, this is the same as with regular HCV or Section 8 participants, but if they are terminated, they are allowed an appeal. So they can contest that and have everything reviewed. Um, and it's important for you to know that because you may be the person who needs to help them through that process. We haven't had tons of people that have been terminated. Most of the time when they have, it's been something egregious. They they really messed things up and had police at the unit, and it's been very involved, so it's been easy to document, and there's only been a couple of people who have made any appeals at all. Um, and just to go back to that, so, um, we've had of the ones that we've had about 25, um, who are not still currently housed. We have 3 or 4 of them who are deceased. If you work with the homeless population, you know that sometimes they can be homeless for a long period of time, and when we finally get them housed, they just don't make it very long. So we have a few that we've lost within the first couple of months of being housed. Um, the others have either been some pretty involved criminal activity, or they have returned to the streets. I don't whether it's something going on with a landlord or a neighbor or whatnot. It was preferable to them at the time to leave the unit, um, and not necessarily tell us what was going on so that we can problem solve and get involved. So, um, all of those things are pretty typical to housing people who have um, a lived experience of homelessness. Um, so the fact that there's only 25 of them in the 200 and some that we've housed is pretty good. But we know that um, with these supportive services, a lot of those things could have been prevented. So part of your role is connecting with the client and having those relationships so that when there is an issue, and they have to go through the appeal process, you can help them through that. Or if there is something going on that you can prevent by encouraging communication with the landlord and things like that, it's gone a long way when we've had somebody involved who can do that. Um, Next slide, please. And this is just a more of an explanation of voluntary termination versus involuntary termination. So when the client chooses to leave the program, um, it's considered voluntary. We've had a handful of clients who choose to surrender their voucher before they get leased up. But we've had a couple who have been leased up and been leased up for a year and who have made the decision to voluntarily terminate. Sometimes it's moving in with a friend or family member because that's what they need to do because living independently is a little too much for them. Um, however, it's been involuntary termination. So um, there's been a couple of not completing their annual recertifications um, and being involved in criminal activity. And again, we do what we can to find out what's going on and prevent evictions, but that's not always possible. Next slide. And so this is me, Liz Shun. The EHV email address is the best email address for any client focused things. The eShun email at the beginning of the slideshow is if you have general questions, I can answer those. But for the most part, you're going to be using this email address. Some of the things that I'll be asking you to do once I figure out where everybody is, I will be inviting you to a monthly case conference meeting. And I think there's a couple familiar names on the list here because you're already our CE lead agencies. So we're already doing those and we'll just add additional staff. But for the rest of you, I'll be inviting you to the monthly case conference. When we have clients who are still in the housing search process, we're talking about those clients, where they're at, and what their barriers are to finding housing. And now, as the program has moved on more, we're talking about the clients who are already housed and what kinds of needs they might have, and making sure they get connected with services. If there is the annual recertification is coming up. Um, then we'll engage or ask you to engage or re-engage with a client to make sure that they're going through that process so that they don't lose their housing because they didn't get all their documents together or they didn't get everything turned in on time and things like that. Um, I think that's it for me. I don't know, Zach, if you want to stop and let them ask questions before you move on to specific services and how they get billed, or you wanna
Sure, yeah,
save.
we can pause for
Okay,
questions.
okay.
Good afternoon. This is Connie from Parkview Park Center, and
Mhm,
I have a question. We have our formal catchment areas, the three counties that we're formally attached to, but we also serve clients in other counties that are not part of those three counties. Is
mhm.
this an option for them to use those services, or do we need to stay within our catchment counties that we've been assigned to?
So are you asking if you were to expand into those counties and provide the services?
Yeah, well, we have case managers and therapy in some of the other counties like Wabash and Huntington, Whitley, and but we're not. That's not our formal catchment area as we
Mhm.
speak as a CMHC. And I know you said you directed this through the CMHCs, and I'm just wondering if we encountered an individual that was in those other counties, are we able to use these dollars? Or are they specifically tied to our catchment area?
They aren't tied to your catchment area. Currently they'd be tied to what you put in your uh, application or RFQ response. But we can, I mean, I don't think that those specific counties are covered right now. So as long as there's no one else covering them, especially the more rural areas, if you want to expand your coverage for this program to include those counties, that would be great. I think we would really welcome that. And if anybody else on the call wanted to do that as well, that would be only positive. We wouldn't have any issue with that.
Just as
Thank
long as we know who to refer people to when they're
Right. Yeah. If you want to do that, just let me know, or shoot Shaquana an email and let her know what the expansion is into what county, so that we can, log that and make sure we have that correct.
Will do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Connie, real quick, which agency did you say you were with?
I'm with Park Center, part of Parkview Health. Christine is my leader that runs that program.
Okay, that's just for my benefit. This is a different group of folks that I'm used to talking to, so I just want to make sure I have general ideas of where you guys are at. Any other questions?
I have one real fast.
Mhm.
This is Austin Mason from Hamilton Center.
Mhm.
So one of our counties is Greene County. And say that individual that gets that voucher for Greene County wants to go to Bloomington. Would
Mhm.
that voucher then go to that other agency that covers that county, or would we stay with them?
So if the client is moving to, like, I would say as long as they're still in your area, we would want you to keep contact, but once they physically move themselves to that area, the other area, that it would be appropriate to connect them with similar providers in that area and then take a step back.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you cover that area, or if it's like adjacent to the area that you cover and you want to stay with that client, then that would be okay. If they're moving, to a totally different part of the state, or somewhere where you just don't have capacity to cover, or there's somebody else there already providing the services, then we would, be totally fine with you, handing that off or telling them that the services aren't going to be available if they move into that area.
Okay.
Any other questions?
All right. If you do
Hmm?
have any other questions, just feel free to shoot me an email. And if the questions are in a similar vein, I'll try to make sure that Zach sends information out so everybody has the question and answer.
All right. Thanks so much, Liz.
Thank you.
Okay, now I'll turn it over to Shaquana, who's going to go through the supportive services specifically, talk about eligibility, eligible services, and how the different programs will fit together.
Thank you, Zach. Can everybody hear me well? Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So hi everybody, I'm Shaquana. I started here at IHCDA about 1 year ago. I started on the emergency rental assistance program, and now I am happy to join Zach's team. About 2 or 3 months ago, I joined, and so we'll all be working together to learn all there is to learn about EHV and the services, the supportive services that you all's clients could receive through the program. Okay, so I'm gonna discuss the eligible services that you could use your funding for, or your clients could use their funding for. CMHCs will be required to assess all participants for eligibility for the IHCP, MRO, and complete the enrollment where they're applicable. The CMHCs must bill for services that are covered by Medicaid first. If an individual qualifies and has a corresponding package before utilizing funds from this award to cover supportive services. When a household is eligible, the mental health block grant funding should be billed first. And then the home ARP funds can be used to supplement that mental health block grant for services not covered under that program, or for households who aren't eligible for the block grant. And just a side note, just want to remind everybody, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows, but I like to remind myself that in order for an individual to receive those block grant funds, they must have a mental illness. So please use the following slides to determine what funding source should be billed when you submit your claims, and claims should be submitted monthly. And claims should be submitted to me monthly, Shaquana. And my email was listed in the first slide, and it's reiterated at the end of the PowerPoint as well. So the following services will be billed to the mental health block grant and also the home ARP. But just a reminder again, make sure that you try to build that block grant first before we build the home ARP. So some of the services that are eligible some of the services that are eligible to be billed to the block grant is outreach services, case management and in-reach services, tenancy supports, employment assistance and job training, substance abuse treatment services, mental health services, life skills training, referral to legal services, applying for insurance, SSI/SSDI outreach, access and recovery. SSI, SSDI outreach, access and recovery, which is a SOAR application. And also you can bill administrative costs directly related to the provision of the services. Things that could be billed to home ARP is childcare, education services, employment assistance, food, housing search, legal services, life skills training, mental health services, outpatient services, outreach services, substance abuse treatment services, transportation, case management, mediation, credit repair. You can get some landlord-tenant liaison on there. Services for the special populations, such as victim services, financial assistance costs, and also administrative costs. So there's a lot of things on there that you could use that funding for. So I'm going to go into what services can be billed under the mental health block grant and also the home ARP services. And again, just a side note, we just want to make sure that we bill that block grant before we try to build the home ARP service. I'm sorry, the home ARP grant or funding. So just a little bit more information about like what those things actually cover. For employment assistance and job training, that could cover like learning skills. I'm sorry, let me go back. The cost of establishing or operating employment assistance and job training programs are eligible. This includes classroom, online or computer instruction, on-the-job instruction, services that assist individuals in securing employment, acquiring learning skills, and or increasing earning potential. Learning skills includes those skills that can be used to secure and retain a job, including the acquisition of vocational licenses or certificates, employment screening, assessment, or testing. So I feel like an example of that would be maybe like drug testing if they have to pay for that, etc. Structured job skills and job seeking skills, special training and tutoring, books that they may need, counseling, job coaching, and also referrals to community resources. Next, please. Thanks. It also covers mental health services. That would be eligible costs are the direct outpatient treatment of mental health conditions that are provided by the licensed professionals. Mental health services are the application of therapeutic processes to personal, family, situational, or occupational problems to bring about positive resolution, which we probably all know. Services for crisis interventions include counseling, individual, family, or group therapy sessions, the prescription of psychotropic medications, or explanations about the use and the management of the medication. Next, please. Life skills training, that will include the budgeting of resources and like money management, household management, conflict management, shopping for food, and other needed items. That'll help with, kind of teaching them about nutrition. Sometimes they may need help with navigating public transportation and also some parent training as well. Next, please. Outreach services will include eligible costs. Eligible costs include the outreach workers' transportation costs and the cell phone to be used by the individual performing the outreach. Costs associated with the following services are eligible: initial assessment, crisis counseling, addressing urgent physical needs such as providing meals, blankets, clothes, or toiletries, actively connecting and providing people with information and referrals to homeless and mainstream programs, and publicizing the availability of the housing and or services provided within the geographic area. So just how we engage those qualified populations. So I wanted to go a little bit deep into this slide, which is the legal services, just because legal can get very complicated, and so we want to make sure that everyone is clear on what legal services that can be covered. Eligible costs are the fees charged by licensed attorneys and by persons under the supervision of licensed attorneys for advice and representation in matters that interfere with a qualifying individual or family's ability to obtain and retain housing. So that can include child support, guardianship, paternity tests, emancipation, legal separation, order of protection. We can help those that are dealing with domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, stalking, appeal of veterans and public benefit claim denials, landlord-tenant disputes. I'm guessing if someone had an eviction or something of that nature, we can help with that. The resolution of outstanding criminal warrants, landlord-tenant matters, provided that the services must be necessary to resolve a legal problem that prohibits the program participant from obtaining permanent housing, or will likely result in the program participant losing the permanent housing in which the program participant currently resides. So if the legal matter is not affecting their housing, unfortunately, I don't believe we will be able to assist with that. Legal services for immigration and citizenship matters and for issues related to mortgages and home ownership are ineligible. Return fee arrangements and contingency fee arrangements are prohibited. Services may include client intake, receiving and preparing cases for trial, provision of legal advice, representation and hearings, and counseling. Fees based on the actual service performed, basically like a service fee, are also eligible, but only if the cost would be less than the cost of the hourly fees. Excuse me. Filing fees and other necessary court costs are also eligible if the subrecipient is a legal services provider and performs the services itself. The eligible costs are the sub-recipient employee salaries and other costs necessary to perform the services. Next, please. We can also cover substance abuse treatment services that would include program participant intake and assessment, outpatient treatment, group and individual counseling, drug testing, and also inpatient detoxification and other inpatient drug or alcohol treatment are ineligible. Case management is kind of self-explanatory, but just to go over a few of them, we can cover conducting the initial evaluation, developing, securing, and coordinating services, obtaining federal, state, and local benefits, monitoring and evaluating the program participant progress, providing information and referrals to other providers, developing an individualized housing and service plan, and conducting reevaluations of the program participants, eligibility, and types and amounts of assistance the program participants need. And unfortunately, Liz had to leave us, but thank you so much for presenting with us, Liz. So the next thing I'll talk about is some ineligible costs. So we won't be able to cover these things. Funds should not be duplicated with other funds or funding sources, and reimbursement will not be provided for services covered by the IHCP programs and provided to enrolled individuals. Services rendered to individuals or households that are not participating in the EHV program will not be reimbursed. So an example is we got a call from an agency recently where a woman said that a man just walked, in the door from the streets, and he wanted to receive some services, and unfortunately, we weren't able to cover those services because he did not have that housing voucher, the emergency housing voucher. Also, financial assistance costs permitted through the Home ARP program, such as rental application fees, security deposits, utility payments, moving costs, and rental arrears. Those must be paid to a third party and cannot be paid directly to the participant. Okay, so we just discussed what services can be covered under the Home ARP and the MHBG. Now we're going to go over what services could only be covered by Home ARP. So child care is one of those. The child must be under the age of 13 unless they have a disability, and a child with a disability must be under the age of 18. Education services, this would include instruction or training in consumer education, health education, substance abuse prevention, literacy, English as a second language, and general education development. I am not sure, but I do not think we will cover like college, like a bachelor's degree, associate's degree. I'm not sure, but I don't think we will cover that. And Zach, you may want to jump in if I'm wrong. Something else that's covered under education is screening, assessment, and testing, individual or group instruction, tutoring, provision of books, supplies, and instructional material, counseling, and a referral to community resources. Outpatient services, this can include, oh, thank you, Stacy. So what, can you jump in and say what it's referred to now? Referred to as now? HSE, and what does that stand for? Sorry.
I believe HSE is high school equivalency.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you. Learn something new every day. Something else it covers is outpatient health services. That's providing an analysis or assessment of a program, participants' health problems, and the development of a treatment plan. That could be very costly, so that's great that that covers that. Assisting program participants to understand their health needs, preventative medical care, provision of appropriate medication, providing follow-up service, and also preventative and non-cosmetic dental care. So I'm guessing that would be like a teeth extraction or something like that. We can cover transportation. I'm gonna go through these in detail as well because we want to be careful when we are letting participants know that we will cover things such as transportation. We don't want them to think it's just anything. So the cost of program participants' travel on public transportation or in a vehicle provided by the project or subrecipient to and from medical care, employment, child care, or other services eligible under the notice. Mileage allowance for service workers to visit program participants and to carry out housing inspections. And so for that first bullet point, we may want to reiterate that we won't be able to cover like, let's go to a party or let's just go and enjoy some leisure activities. Unfortunately, we won't be able to cover that. The cost of purchasing or leasing the vehicle in which staff transports program participants and or staff serving program participants. The cost of gas, insurance, taxes, and maintenance for the vehicle. The cost of project or subrecipient staff to accompany or assist program participants to utilize public transportation. If the public transportation options are not sufficient within the area, the project may make a one-time payment on behalf of the program participant needing the car repairs or maintenance required to operate a personal vehicle, subject to the following. Payments for car repairs or maintenance on behalf of the program participant may not exceed 10% of the Blue Book value. And payments for car repairs or maintenance must be paid by the project or subrecipient directly to the third party that the repairs or, the third party that prepares or maintains the car. Projects or subrecipients may require program participants to share the cost of car repairs, and the project must establish policies and procedures surrounding payments for the cost of gas, insurance, taxes, and one-time payment for car repairs. So we want to make sure we're not getting too crazy with those car repair amounts. And unfortunately, if the Blue Book value of the car is like, for instance, $500, 10% of that, hopefully they wouldn't need nothing more than like an oil change or maybe some windshield wipers or something that's inexpensive. Next slide, please. Credit repairs, home ARP funds may pay for credit counseling and other services necessary to assist with credit repairs. The assistance does not include the payment or modification of a debt. So we won't pay off debt. We'll just help repair their credit with some credit counseling. Financial assistance costs include rental application fees, security deposits, utility deposits. Those utilities could be gas, electric, water, or sewer. Utility payments. Home ARP funds may pay for up to 24 months of utility payments per program participant per service, including up to 6 months of utility payments in arrears per service. So I wanted to reiterate that. Moving costs. The home ARP funds may pay for moving costs such as truck rental or hiring a moving company. This assistance may include payment of temporary storage fees for up to 3 months. So if it exceeds the 3 months, then unfortunately we will not be able to cover that cost. And also payment of rental arrears. So the funds may be used for a one-time payment for up to 6 months of rental arrears, including any late fees or charges, and if necessary for the household to maintain their existing household, or for those without housing, if necessary to remove a demonstrated barrier to obtaining housing.
I'm going to add here real quick that some of these things, like Liz mentioned earlier, are things that the PHAs are paying for EHV participants. And so you'll want to check with the PHA first to make sure that they aren't providing that cost. And if they are, then if they are able to provide the payment for those types of costs, then they would you'll rely on that first, and then if they are not, or the PHA isn't offering that type of assistance, then these funds would be able to be used.
Thank you, Zach.
Okay, thank you, Shaquana. I'm going to talk a little bit now about just general program guidelines, and I do apologize. I started recording this webinar, but not until we were about a half hour in. So some things were missed, but we can share that with you. And obviously we'll be sending out the slides as well. And Shaquana can share our final program manual, our claims documentation, and these slides so that you have access to everything and can make use of it. We'll also be posting it on our website. That web page isn't live yet, but we will let you know when it is. But we'll send you everything as an attachment anyway, so that you still have it even before that gets posted. So our expectations of, for the program, so for the PHA, so if your PHA that you're working with is just IHCDA, there is no additional MOU needed or required, since obviously, we know about the program and have a contractual relationship, so it's not necessary. If your coverage area includes another PHA, it's probably a good idea to um, to enter into an MOU with that PHA, just to establish that relationship, to share information about a client. If they are comfortable providing you with that information without one, then that is probably fine. But that might be necessary to facilitate that relationship with the agency. And if you need assistance with that, we can help you engage and make connections there. And case conferencing is probably another good avenue to start those conversations, since the PHAs would be present there as well. So attending the CE meetings in the region or regions that you're working in, so that is the case conferencing meetings that Liz was mentioning earlier. So attending those is important, so you can get that information about the household. If you're at that meeting, and you're involved in the case conferencing and the referral is made, then you can immediately connect with that household. You do not have to wait for them to get approved for the EHV or for EHV to reach out to them, the PHA to reach out to them. You can, as long as the referral is being made, and you have access to that information, then you can reach out to begin providing services at that time. If they ended up not going through or falling through the cracks on the program, then you would they wouldn't be eligible for ongoing services through the program, unfortunately, but they could receive some additional home ARP services for up to 3 months to help them in the transition, and that would be up to you to determine. So if they for instance, if you were at the case conferencing and somebody got referred and you reached out to them to start working with them, but they didn't really engage, and then a week later, turned down the EHV, then of course you'd be under no obligation to provide any additional services there since they were never really engaged with services in the first place. However, if they went through the whole process and were determined ineligible, or something happened to where they weren't able to get that voucher, but they were engaging and had a clear and obvious service need. If you had the ability and the resources, you would be able to provide a little bit of additional services there, like I said, through home ARP only, but up to 3 months just to help them. So you could potentially help them get set up in a new unit and get connected to some other resources. Assess all households referred for SMI or SED diagnosis. So this is mandatory because it is how you assess the eligibility for the mental health block grant funds. And like Shaquana was saying earlier, those funds should be billed before home ARP in all cases. And then likewise, assessing households for eligibility for MRO is also required because that funding should be also billed first before this supplemental funding is billed at all. So generally speaking, MRO would be the first preferred source, followed by mental health block grant, and then home ARP would always come last. And then employing staff that are trained in the SOAR process. So I believe that was part of our RFQ as well. And I think everybody has staff trained in SOAR. If you need additional access to SOAR training or resources, let us know and we can connect you with the SOAR lead who can provide that the training or the soonest training opportunity. SOAR I was a local SOAR lead in Indianapolis for a very brief period, but I did a train the trainer in Iowa on SOAR and learned all about how to do the application. And it is a very, very valuable process and really does help and has a much, much greater success rate. And it doesn't result in clients losing, a third of their settlements to a lawyer fee, and those. And when you get the lawyers involved, it generally takes way longer because they don't do anything until an appeal, and then they appeal a denial, which takes forever. So the SOAR process is really super helpful. It doesn't seem to be super common in Indiana for whatever reason that even the SOAR trained agencies or staff just I don't think have the time and resources to really do the full process because it is pretty resource intensive and time intensive. This is specifically called out here as something that we want to incentivize and we want you to do. So if it takes additional time or resources, I understand that can be a barrier, but please try to make that that work because it is a really great resource and tool to use to get people insistence that they're entitled to. So we definitely want to make sure they get connected. Provide individualized supportive services to households enrolled in the program. Obviously, enter household information into the homeless management information system. There's more information about this and how to get into the system or get the project set up in our program administrative manual, which you'll be receiving hopefully this afternoon yet. And that you might already be in there for some other programs that you have. So it might be easy to get set up, but you'll definitely want to get working on that because there's some training and stuff you have to do. Not too crazy intensive, but it is its own thing and its own process for sure. So if you're not in the system at all, you'll definitely want to look at that in our manual and contact the HMIS help desk to get that process going. And of course, we can help you. We have HMIS access and we don't manage that system. It's other staff here, but we obviously work with them and know about the system. So if you need any assistance getting into that at all, just let us know. Reach out to Shaquana, and we'll hand you off to our HMIS staff and make sure you get connected. Assess households for eligibility for the home ARP program. So if they're going to be receiving home ARP services, which maybe hopefully not everybody will be, because the other services are enough, then or cover most of the same things, then the home ARP program, generally speaking, everybody will. I cannot see a scenario where somebody wouldn't be eligible for home ARP supportive services based on the eligibility criteria of the EHV program. But we want to there's a worksheet we have that we'll be sending out that to log client eligibility, and you would just need to maintain that in the client file. That way, if anybody did look in a monitoring, you're retaining that documentation that you verified that they were eligible for home ARP. And then complete reporting as required, which SAMHSA and DMHA, as of now, don't have any specific reporting requirements that they're asking of us or of you. IHCDA reporting is going to entail just HMIS, and then we will also have a quarterly report that for home ARP that's used to submit data to HUD, which I'll be talking about in a second. And then likely we'll have a closeout form when it comes to the grant end that will just have ask you to summarize some data and information from the grant, help us collect information that way. But there shouldn't be any additional reporting burden other than HMIS on an ongoing basis in the IDIS sheet. The MOU, like I mentioned, so if you have an MOU or you enter into an MOU, go ahead and send us a copy. We would like to have those on file. I mentioned the participant eligibility worksheet briefly. So this is a screenshot that just shows that. We'll send this to you. So essentially, you'll have the top section assessing eligibility for mental health block grant, and a spot where you can describe what is the documentation, and then the on the bottom then would be the home ARP, and then just where you would sort of check the which bucket the household falls into, and then what documentation is collected, which for home ARP can be, there's also examples of what documentation is acceptable. For home ARP, it's likely just going to be that referral, the EHV referral, because the CE referral is evidence of homelessness. And so that would count on its own. You wouldn't need to collect any additional documentation for that, but you would just record that you have that and save that in the client file. That way it's there and as proof. So participant selection plan. So for most of our housing programs, we require a participant selection plan or tenant selection plan that just outlines, how you're going to take clients, where you're going to get referrals, how you're going to prioritize referrals, et cetera. So for this program, since it's sort of all that's sort of defined for you, and it's so specific, there really isn't anything that is that you have to plan and put in writing as to how you're going to accept clients. So and we probably wouldn't even be asking you to do this. Unfortunately, though, as part of the home ARP program, this is a requirement for all home ARP funding. So you have to have one. So we have created an example participant selection plan that we'll send to you. It's very short and to the point and just has the required information in it. You are free to take that and just, put your organization's name on it, put it on your letterhead, and then send it back to us, and we will, basically automatically approve that if it's, the template or example one that we created. You could also adapt that and send it back to us. And if you adapt it to add any additional barriers or requirements, well, we don't want to see any additional barriers or requirements. So I guess just don't do that in the first place. But if you adapt it and make any substantive changes, then we'll review it. And before we are required to review and approve it. So we'd have to review it then and you know, provide approval. It might take a little bit longer, but as long as it's not substantially different, it should be fine. But if you use the example one, we can just basically turn right around and say it's fine. So talking about claims, so claims are unfortunately a little tricky for this program just because we're combining two different programs. So for home ARP supportive services, so Shaquana mentioned earlier to submit the claim information to her. That is true for sure. Great guidance for the mental health block grant funds. For the home ARP supportive services claims, we're going to route those through our IHCDA online claims management system. So to do that, you will create an account at IHCD Online. There's some more information, here on the slide and in our manual and contact information for our claims staff, so that if you have, issues logging in or something like that, or, doing that kind of thing within the software, then you can contact them directly and they can help you with that. We can connect you with them as well, but we wouldn't be able to. We can't see what you see on the claims software side. So any like technical issues like that, they would be able to help you directly. So for required claims documentation, we want to see the claim summary page that is generated within the online system. It's not a separate thing that you'll have to come up with. The general ledger, supportive services financial narrative form, and that is a form we'll send to you. That just outlines, just kind of summarizes the different things that you've spent money on in that month. And then invoices or receipts if there's more than if the amount or charge to the program is more than $200 for things purchased or charged to the program. Generally, I expect most of it would be staff time, and in that case, you just have to show the total amount and that you've distributed that to staff for salary or wages. Here's a screenshot of the financial narrative form. Like I said, we'll send that to you. So you'd see it just kind of outlines the different buckets for supportive services that are eligible costs. And then you would just, put the costs or in raw cost or hours spent on the different categories or different fees if there were other fees paid for legal assistance or things like that, then you would include that information here as well. And this just gives us a way to kind of just see what money is being spent on. If there's question, there's some overlap obviously in some of these services like outreach and case management or mediation and landlord tenant liaison. There's a lot of overlap in some of those things. So if it's something like that where it could fit in either one, just use your judgment and choose one that seems to make the most sense. It doesn't really matter in terms of what's being claimed, since the funds aren't broken out like this in line items. We just want to collect how much money is being spent on case management versus like food costs or things like that. So, or childcare, how big of a need is that? So we just like to keep something that we can use for data collection purposes.
Hey Zach.
Yeah.
This is Stacy at Hamilton Center. I don't have that form. I got the MHBG supportive services invoice.
Oh, okay.
Excel, but I did not get that one that you just showed us.
Okay, we will definitely send that to you. Those are both valid, so there's just a different form for.
Yeah, it definitely has different options, so I need.
Yeah, we'll get that sent to you.
Thank you.
And then I mentioned the HUD reporting form. So that is what this is. So it's the IDIS report, which IDIS is a HUD system where they collect data on various different programs. And so this is due quarterly and will make sure to remind you what the due dates are and be reaching out to collect this information. And so there's instructions on the sheet, which we'll also be sending out to you. But essentially, it's just collecting the total number of households served with home ARP services and their various, demographic information and household size and type. And then if they are in a homeless household or if they're non-homeless. So you'll see in the instructions the how to fill it out, but the annoying thing about this is what they I think are trying to capture is households that are homeless who are moving into housing and then are no longer homeless. So they're trying to catch the information here, which means that unfortunately, if somebody starts in the program as homeless, then you would put them in that bucket. You don't keep them there in the next quarter. If they're then housed, you would move them into the next section so that they'd be in the non-homeless households. So it's kind of just it's not that complicated, but it's just a little weird the way that it's done. And the instructions outline it pretty well. So I just wanted to mention that here. So then for a mental health block grant, so again, claims for mental health block grant should be sent to Shaquana via email. So for these claims, basically the same information we'd be looking for. The financial narrative form for mental health block grant, which is, I think there's a screenshot of that next as well, actually, but basically the same info, but for that program. And then supporting documentation. And then the only difference really here is that for mental health block grant, instead of submitting the claim form and claim summary through the online system, we would just need a signed invoice with the contract number on it sent to Shaquana that shows how much you're requesting. So that would serve as that sort of summary or official claim documentation. So and that would go again directly to Shaquana via email and should also be submitted monthly. So then this is the screenshot of that financial narrative form. Straightforward, hopefully. And I'll turn it over to Shaquana to take us to the end, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Hi, everybody again. Thank you, Zach. So I'm just going to go over the next few slides pretty quickly because everybody is aware of confidentiality. And I'm pretty sure we've all had tons of training on it, but we just want to make sure that we are developing and implementing and maintaining written procedures to require that all records containing personal information for our individuals and families who applies will be kept secure and confidential. Like, for instance, their address or location of the participant, especially if they're fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, things of that nature. Also, we want to keep confidential the documented status of a qualifying population. Oh, I just said the same. Just repeated it basically. That's fleeing or attempting to flee the violence, domestic violence, stalking, etc. If an individual or family qualifies because the individual or family is fleeing from any kind of violence, we want to make sure that we have an acceptable evidence, includes like oral or written statement by the individual or head of household seeking assistance. Just a statement stating that they are fleeing and the situation that they are fleeing from. An oral statement may be documented by either a written certification by the individual or the head of household, or written certification by a victim service provider, intake worker, social worker, etc. Subrecipients must follow HIPAA rules. The MHBG contract and program manual contain information regarding the HIPAA requirements. And they aren't that different from the ones that we normally see. How we are going to determine or measure the performance of our subrecipients. Oh, I'm sorry, Zach. I went to my my PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm following along.
So how we're gonna measure the performance of you all? We're gonna determine the number of eligible participants that receive supportive services, the number of eligible participants enrolled in Medicaid services through the participation in the program. We're also going to try to determine the number of participants that remain stably housed after the first year in the program. And also we're going to try to keep up with the amount of funds, not try, but we are going to keep up with the amount of funds dispersed to subrecipients. This is just a screenshot of our program manual, which is available on the IHCDA website.
Will be,
sorry. This is just some statistics or some information about how the vouchers have been allocated. So you see a few housing authorities on that list, and it lists the number of vouchers offered to that housing authority. This is a summary of the EHV awards, the current issuances and lease vouchers as of yesterday. This is updated daily, I believe. And I forgot to include the link, but I can include the link on the email that I send you with a copy of the PowerPoint if you were just interested in knowing, how the vouchers and the awards are awarded out. How many? Okay, so the fun part, let's look at some scenarios to see if you can answer the questions. So Jeff is a 38-year-old single man that has been living on the street with his cat for the past 2 years. Jeff deals with manic episodes and was diagnosed with a serious mental illness. Due to not being able to afford his medication, it has been difficult for Jeff to keep a job. Throughout the 2 years, he has been able to crash at family members' houses to take a shower and eat a hot meal. Jeff was recently identified as a person in need of services by an agency within his community. He visited with a local service agency who recommended a coordinated entry assessment. During this assessment, the organization determined that the need for housing was very high for Jeff and his cat, Oscar. The CE lead sent the packet over to the EHV team at IHCDA so that it could be added to the tracking sheet and assigned an EHV ID number. They also sent the referral to Tanya, the supportive services for EHV provider. After Tanya received Jeff's application, her organization determined that Jeff has an SMI, which is a serious mental illness, and is severely homeless. Jeff is then determined to be eligible for the emergency housing voucher. Next, the LSA has began trying to contact Jeff to set up a briefing and issue his voucher. Tanya can begin the housing search for Jeff. It has been about 2 weeks, and Jeff has been able to locate an apartment in the neighborhood he grew up in. Great. He turns in the RTA form so that an inspection of the desired living quarters could be inspected. The property is inspected within 2 weeks, and it passes. Jeff has agreed upon a move-in date with the rental company for Jolly Holly Apartments. After a few months, Jeff began feeling overwhelmed and believes he needs to see a mental health specialist. He reaches out to Tanya and requests resources to help with the way he has been feeling. Tanya refers Jeff to an organization that handles mental health crisis. Next, please. So, which invoice should Tanya submit to request funding for Jeff's visit to the mental health clinic? And anyone can answer either in the chat or take yourself off mute. So which invoice? So would he submit a mental health block grant invoice or a home American Rescue Plan invoice?
Well, if we're referring him to the agency and they have to do the assessment, determine MRO eligibility, just because he has a diagnosis doesn't mean it's an eligible diagnosis for MRO. So I would say block grant at this point.
Okay, Zach, let's see if that's the correct answer. Great. If you guessed that Tanya should send in an invoice for a mental health block grant, you were correct. While this would be eligible under home ARP, MHBG should always be billed first if the client is eligible. And we have one more scenario. Natasha is the mother of Stephanie. She is a single mother and has been struggling to make ends meet and sustain shelter for her and her baby girl. Natasha has not been able to keep a job because she has not been able to afford childcare for Stephanie. Natasha does not have any family members in Indiana and has been staying in a local homeless shelter for the past 2 years. She was recently identified as a person in need of services by an agency within the community and received a CE assessment. During this assessment, the organization determined that the need for housing was very high for Stephanie and her daughter. After receiving the determination, the CE lead sent the packet over to the EHV team so that she can be assessed for the emergency housing voucher. After the team received Natasha's application, they determined that Natasha and her baby Stephanie are severely homeless. The EHB staff began reaching out to Sam, the supportive services for EHB provider. The EHB provider for supportive services to help retrieve the necessary documents for Natasha. Her application was then screened and determined if Natasha was within the income guidelines. After a couple of weeks, Natasha was notified that she was eligible for the EHB. After receiving her voucher, Natasha successfully located a 2-bedroom apartment for her and Stephanie to live. Sam's organization determined that Natasha doesn't have a serious mental illness, but helped her get connected to childcare and employment services. Which invoice should Sam submit to request funding for Natasha's childcare and employment services? Kristen answered home ARP. If you guessed that Sam could send in an invoice for home ARP, Kristen, you are correct. And let me explain why. In Jeff's case, IHCDA would reimburse the grantee from the mental health block grant funding. We will use this funding because Jeff has a severe mental illness. Don't forget, in order to be eligible for those funds, one must have a serious mental illness. In Natasha's case, IHCDA will reimburse the grantee from the home ARP funding. We will use this source mainly because Natasha, nor anyone in her household was diagnosed with a severe mental illness.
Also, I didn't think about this earlier, but the child care services wouldn't be eligible under mental health block grant anyway, so.
Okay, right. All right, next steps. Please send your participant selection plans to me, Shaquana, and also please notify me, Shaquana, and Liz, who from your organization will be attending case conference and meetings. And that's just a short email.
And then we will also be sending out all the information referenced today, including the program manual, the claims documentation, financial narrative sheets, and the IDIS worksheet, and the participant eligibility worksheet. Okay, so I think with that, that is all the content we have presented. So it did take a while to get through, but we do have about 15 minutes still on the clock. If there's any questions, we'd be happy to dive in.
This is Christine Kelty with Park Center. You mentioned needing HMIS access, which we do have. I'm curious what we'll be entering in HMIS, if there'll be a separate program we'll be entering participants under, or what's that look like?
Yeah, it would be a separate program set up as its own program. So you'll request that project setup, and they should set it up as a new program, so you would be able to do the typical, client entry and everything, and collect the universal data elements.
Hi, Zach. I have a follow-up question to that. This is Amber with Aspire.
Mhm.
When I went to submit the form to request a project to be created in HMIS, I wasn't sure what the project name should be. Does it have to be something specific, or do I just make it up?
That's a good question. I don't think that it really matters. Maybe we'll want to do a standard naming convention. So let me get back to you on that. I'm going to check with our HMIS team and see if they recommend we do like a standard naming or something. And then we'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about any of the content we went over today?
You did say right at the end that you're gonna send us all those documents, and this PowerPoint will also be in the attachments?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. Well, no, a ton of questions. I hope that's a good sign. That means that everybody's very comfortable with the program and everything presented. So if not, that is okay. Just reach out to Shaquana anytime with any questions, and we'll be sure to get those materials over to you right away. Like I said, just get us that participant selection plan as soon as you can. We technically want to get that approved prior to you really starting. It's not the biggest deal, but just as soon as you can get us something on that'd be great. And then I will reach out with that HMS information and make sure everybody knows how to set up that project. And then if there's a naming convention that we are going to ask you to use. So look forward to hearing from us soon on those things, and then and reach out to us in the meantime if you have any additional questions. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
You say that plan, do we already have that? Because I don't see that I've received that. Is that still to come to us, or are we supposed to already have that?
Yeah, that's going to be in the materials that Shaquana's
Okay.
sending.
I felt like I was missing something to you timely when you said it that way.
Yeah, I actually kind of forgot about that because it doesn't make that much sense with this program. But then I remember that that's a home ARP requirement, so we have to have something there. So it's very simple. The document that we have, the example one, is just a page long. So you can, like I said, just take that and put it on your letterhead or whatever, and send it back to
Perfect.
us, and it'll be good to go. So, all
Thank you.
right, thanks everybody so much, and have a good rest of your afternoon.